just entered the theater of an alien sky. If the words and images seem strange to you, there's a reason for this. Our world was once a vastly different place. To experience this won't hurt you, and there is nothing to fear. In following the ancient story of the labyrinth, the most obvious question is why? From what human experience did this remarkable ancient idea arise? In our investigation of the theme, the first clue emerges from the archetypal personalities we've come to recognize: Mother Goddess, Warrior Hero, and Chaos Monster, all with a displaced sovereign power lurking in the background. For several decades, we've sought to illuminate such archetypes. In that work, we've described the emergence and progressive evolution of an extraordinary spectacle in the heavens, a gathering of planets close to Earth. Planets inspiring the myth-making epoch of human history. Our radical claim is that the archetypes, the global patterns, are explained uniquely and concretely by the planetary history we've reconstructed, specifically a gathering of planets extremely close to Earth. Yes, that idea will appear preposterous, but preposterous only until one sees that hundreds of archetypes, hundreds of global cross-cultural themes become predictable. And not just as general themes, but down to hundreds of highly specific details. As newcomers to this topic will quickly discover, it's the apparent absurdity of mythology that ultimately changes the picture to the extent that things begin to make sense. Nothing in our familiar experience would anticipate, much less account for, the archetypal theme of externalized intestines, a theme we noted briefly in our prior discourse. That theme arose in relation to the remarkable face of the Mesopotamian giant Humbaba, displaying nothing else than knotted intestines. But actually, it's this transparently absurd feature that opens the door to a much broader field of evidence. From the Americas to Africa and the South Pacific, we find recollections of the dancing warrior trickster hero either unraveling his own intestines or the intestines of an alter ego figure. That such bizarre imagery would occur from one land to another surely requires an explanation, and a believable, fact-based explanation must be possible. One of numerous examples will be found amongst the North American Ojibwe, whose trickster Winnebago loses his intestines in his wanderings and hangs them in a tree. Well, that's not an idea one would expect in the normal course of human experience, either primitive or modern. In some tales, intestines are pulled from the trickster, causing his death, while in closely linked stories they become food for other creatures, or the trickster himself eats fragments of his own intestines, thinking they are food. Well, such absurdities are, as we've repeatedly discovered, the window to the hidden substructure of collective memories crying out for investigation. For those who will follow the logical ground rules of this investigation, the outcome will be a full and convincing explanation of world mythology, down to virtually all of the recurrent patterns. If our fundamental observation is correct, it could not be otherwise. It seems that the labyrinthine dance of the hero Theseus, as cited in our previous discourse, gives us some powerful clues. The dance had its own unique and awkward form, called the crane dance, made famous by the warrior's successful entry into the Cretan Labyrinth. At the level of common perception, the whole thing is indeed ridiculous. But that's why it's so essential to view the story through the lens of our starting point, the reconstructed polar configuration. Suddenly, the crane dance of Theseus becomes predictable, a uniquely appropriate visual image of the off-axis movements of the legendary warrior, the masculine power Mars, in his labyrinthine dance. This awkward bobbing movement would not even be possible without the off-axis displacement suggested here. Of course, given our overarching interest in the global substructure, we could not possibly limit our attention to just one localized idea. Numerous Hindu myths describing the dance of Shiva are complemented by wide-ranging images of a hero or trickster whose arms and legs mimic the whorl or swastika form of the discharged streamers we've noted in our previous discourse. It was said that the warrior Shiva held his consort Sati above his head, again as we should expect, and in their violent whirling movements the body or essence of Sati was dispersed in flame. Another seeming absurdity, but a perfect reflection of the discharge activity we've located at the visual center of the labyrinth. Here's the description of Shiva's dance by Stella Kramrisch in her book The Presence of Shiva. He danced exceedingly, his arms flailing the regions. The stars were scattered by the swish of his hair. Death, love, and despair syncopated the escalating speed of his Tandava dance. The earth shook while Shiva went on dancing in frenzy, his eyes whirling. As Shiva danced on, the body of Sati became lighter and lighter, and he saw that limbs and parts had fallen from it. In the end, all that was left was the mythic yoni, the core feminine identity of the goddess, which means, of course, the archetypal goddess, the planet Venus. A comparative analysis will show that the goddess' four arms, here described as flailing the regions, are beyond any reasonable doubt the arms of the equal-limbed cross, the cross that in prior, more stable phases marked out the four regions or four quarters of the celestial habitation. In other words, the seemingly outrageous depictions are indeed internally consistent. As noted in our previous discourse, when the fourfold discharge was set in a whirling motion, the effect was a swastika-like pattern. And so in ancient Sumerian symbolism, we see the arms of the swastika in their undeniable connection to the long flowing hair of female figures, reminding us of the words of the Sumerian Inanna, the planet Venus, to her consort Dumuzi. I will whirl my hair in heaven for you. When the mythic imagery is seen in its original context, no image of the swastika makes more sense than that of the goddess's luminous, whirling hair at the center of the labyrinth. An obvious complement is the occasional image of the Medusa head with its wildly disheveled hair at the center of the labyrinth, giving rise to the symmetrical three legs of the Triskelion. As we previously observed, it was from that chaotic discharge activity that the more stable, symmetrical discharge phases emerged. Consider also the underlying similarity of Theseus's archetypal dance to the famous dance of the Hindu Shiva, also occurring in conjunction with a goddess, who becomes the warrior's consort, as we should expect. And not just a goddess, but the goddess Venus in particular, as we should also expect. In the Iliad, Homer tells us that the legendary king Daedalus, quoting here, once wrought in Knossos Broad a dancing ground for fair-haired Ariadne. Of course, the fair-haired Ariadne is a recognized alter ego of the fair-haired Aphrodite, or Venus. But perhaps the best clue is provided by the golden thread of Ariadne, said to have been unraveled by Theseus as he danced through the winding passages. By this identification, the unraveling thread becomes a perfect analog to the unwinding intestines appearing in other variations of the same archetypal theme. As we repeatedly noted, the symbolic, spiraling life breath in its mythic interpretation as a coiled cord or lock of hair, meant nothing else than the cometary essence of the Venus goddess herself. In this realization, it becomes clear that the hero's unraveling of the thread in his meandering dance is in fact a corollary to the Hindu Shiva's whirling dispersal of the essence of his consort Sati, the goddess Venus. To oversimplify a complex story, we can see that the hero unwinding the golden thread means the same thing as the hero unwinding his own intestines, which means the same thing as the hero making his way through the passages of the labyrinth, which means the same thing as the awkward dance or crane dance of the hero and the goddess. So the seeming competition between incompatible storytelling is instantly resolved by allowing the underlying events to shine through.